It's the Underdogs back with you for a special second show of the week because it's March Madness. Yesterday, we gave you an hour-long special bractacular on the men's bracket. Today, it's time to turn to the women's NCAA tournament. As always, I'm Jordan Brenner, joined by my co-host Peter Keating. Peter, you ready to tackle another bracket?
I'm ready to tackle the bractacular again. Let's go. It's a great day.
So let's talk big picture right now, okay? Because look, we've been doing upset picks on the men's side for almost 2 decades. It's been much more recent that we've been able to sort of extend our research into the women's tournament. Part of what we've dealt with, Peter, and it's a frustrating thing about some of the obstacles women's sports still has to climb, is that there's a lack of available analytics in some cases. So, just explain for people who are listening how we've sort of had to overcome that and what we're doing to sort of bridge that gap in analytical equity, if you will.
Yeah, Jordan, if I can put my dork cap on for a moment.
Does it ever come off, Peter?
I was going to say, unless you think it's already been there, let me say that let me take a little bit of a dorky bow for one moment in the way that we're helping or trying to help contribute to closing this huge, persistent gap between the numbers available for men's sports and women's sports. Jordan, if I said to you, what's the first time a 16 beat a 1? I just said it like that. What would you say?
I would probably, well, I know what you want me to say.
Well, no, because you're also a dork, you're going to know the correct answer. But most people would
Harvard,
think about
right.
it and say like, oh, when was it Virginia losing in the men's tournament?
Right.
Actually, a 16 seed named Harvard beat number 1 Stanford back in 1998. Okay, that's a great underdog story. Go right now. Go online. Try to find data about it. You maybe can find a box score if you search hard enough, but there's no way there's no way to get data that translates into being able to see a style of play or how a game or a season or a player developed over time. The way that KenPom's been around for the men forever, you can barely get tempo free just in the past couple of years of being able to get per 100 possession stats for women's games. So not only is it harder to get the information, but it's harder for fans to get enthusiastic and to also to draw lessons, right? I mean, right now, people, including the people who make up the brackets, including the people who vote in AP polls, including fans, including fan bases, even dedicated fan bases, rely too much on the old stuff, the eye test, the one-loss records, what you've seen in the past week, right? So all of the biases that we've spent all our time trying to use data to wean people away from in the men's game, they're still pretty present in the men's game. Here's the good news, okay? The good news is that the women's game right now, at this very moment, from last year's tournament to this year's tournament, has this unbelievably cool mix of a dominant stars and enjoyable upset potential. I mean, right now, Jordan, we're looking at South Carolina team that nobody expected to go undefeated again, but it has gone undefeated. And South Carolina is great at everything, and they have everything you want. You want star players. You want a magnetic coach. You want a team that does everything. You know, we talk about shooting. We talk about possession building. South Carolina does it in every way. And guess what? This year, they shoot threes. Great, too. Last year, they did not. This year, they're shooting 39% from behind the arc. At the same time, as everyone knows now, you've got Iowa. You've got LSU. You've still got Uconn. You've got Stanford. Even kind of casual fans are kind of thrilled by about half a dozen teams, right? And you have 10 teams or so that are legitimate title contenders now. Now, there's another 15 or maybe behind them once you get past those, okay? You don't really need to argue the way you do about them in the men's bracket about who's top 30 or 40 or whatever. So there's not a heck of a lot of parity in the upset percentages we're going to talk about once you get to past the first handful. But Jordan, right? Am I right? You and I both are sensing this increasing parity, yet also dominance, and it's a great mix to behold at the moment for the game.
The state of the women's game is fantastic. Okay, never been better. And yes, it's not. Look, South Carolina side, it's a lot less top heavy. There's just more good players to go around now, so there are more upsets to predict, to manufacture, and it's what we do best. So, Peter, let's get into it. Okay, we have it's It's a little different from what we saw on the men's side because I think it's a little more extreme, right? We've got some high chances at the top of our upset list and maybe fewer in like that 20 to 30% range, maybe. But let's start off with a team that we identified as a vulnerable giant on last week's show, right? And they
Yeah.
sure enough landed two possible matchups. Either one could end in an upset, and that's six-seeded Syracuse, who will either play Arizona or Auburn. Our model gives Syracuse a 57% chance of losing to Arizona and about 38% chance if it's Auburn. Explain why.
Now, first of all, even if a team has a better than 50% chance of winning, if it's an 11 seed in a 6-11 matchup, we call it an upset because millions of people out there are not actually betting on the games or thinking about the money line. They're filling out brackets, right? So a 6-11 game, the 11 seed has a majority chance of winning. We still call an upset. In this case, what you have is a classic misseeding leading to a vulnerable giant. Look, Syracuse is a great story. When I was in college, Felicia Leggett-Jack, who's the coach at Syracuse now, was a star player at Syracuse. She's a great story. She's led the program back from an abusive coaching scandal. They're ahead of schedule. They exceeded expectations. She's recovered from what turned out to be non-cancerous surgery. We wish her well in her ongoing recovery. They have a great player in Jaisha Fair, who scores more than 20 points a game and can do everything. However, they're just not worthy of a 6 seed. I mean, our model says they're the number 34 team in the country. I'm sorry, 46 team in the country. Arizona is 34. Our model sees Arizona as straight up a better team than Syracuse.
Well, and Arizona is like the definition of a wounded assassin. Okay, they played in the Pac-12, which is unbelievably tough this year. USC, UCLA, Colorado, Stanford, on and on and on. They've been, they got beat up. They've 1-6 in close games this year. Arizona games decided by less than 5 points. So very quickly, a 17-15 record, just with some different luck, could be a lot more impressive. They lost three Pac-12
Jordan,
games in a row.
They lost those 3 Pac-12 games in a row by a total of 6 points. Everyone loves USC. They lost to USC twice by 2 points each time. It's just been a tough season record-wise. They have one trait that makes them a really powerful potential Cinderella. They're 5th in the country in steal percentage. They disrupt opponents. Okay, Syracuse is a great offensive rebounding team. They build possessions too, but Arizona projects to be a really pesky opponent for any giant.
Right. So that's in the Region 3 in Portland. They've got to come up with better names for these regions. That's the one thing I'm going to say. If you're going to go to 2 regional sites, that's fine, but sorry, Region 3, Region 4. It's not exciting. Let's come up with something better. Maybe that can be our job this off season.
Yeah, I wish you'd given me some advance notice on that. I could have gotten to work on that. But yeah, Portland 3 isn't too sexy.
So let's stick there and talk about 5th seeded Baylor against either Vanderbilt or Columbia. Again, 2 12 seeds playing in the play-in game. What are we thinking there?
Well, look, I like those giant killing matchups. Our model gives them Vanderbilt about a 20% chance of beating Baylor, Columbia about a 16% chance. This is because Baylor is a very strong team, but these teams have very strong, what we call giant killing or Cinderella tactics, and they're in unusual combinations. Vanderbilt is 54th in the country in offensive rebounding percentage and 18th in steal percentage. Now you put those together, that means Baylor's often taking a lot more, Vanderbilt is often just taking a lot more shots than its opponents. You have to do that to catch up with a superior team and try to keep up with them and have any chance of beating them. Columbia is even more so. They're 6th in offensive rebounding, and they're 35th in the percentage of shots they take from behind the arc. So they're a strong offensive rebounding and yet also a strong 3-point shooting team. And you're going to want to know this name. Here's one really cool thing about analytics on the women's side. It will lead you to players to notice beyond the same old usual superstars. Abby Shue at Columbia, 20.6 points a game, 7.4 rebounds a game, and she's shooting 40% on 3-pointers. She's a cool player. These are 2 cool killers to watch out for against Baylor.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting for me. I spent a lot of time back in Levy and Gym during my year at grad school at Columbia, and so it's really fun to see the Columbia women get in at large into the tournament.
Yeah.
and I hope I get a chance to see them play
Another thing that
against
makes the
Baylor.
women's game great right now, right, is that there are strong mid-majors and the potential for at-large bids that aren't just the same usual suspects.
Yep. One last game in this region before we move on elsewhere. And just as a reminder, to qualify as a bracket breaker game or a game that fits into our model, there has to be a difference of at least 5 seeds. So it's why we don't look at 7, 10, or 8-9 games. Those are pretty close to coin flips. We don't look at a 4-5 game in the second round, etc. But the 4-13 game, Virginia Tech against number 13 Marshall, we give that about a 22% chance of an upset, and that's not even accounting for injuries in the case of Virginia Tech, right?
That's right. And so subjectively, I like this a lot. I think I might be picking this as an upset in my brackets. Virginia Tech, just number 21 ranking in the nation according to our model. They play slow. They take a lot of threes, so they're not doing a lot to protect themselves and to just build up safe possessions. And Marshall, the Thundering Herd, man, they're 7th in steals. They take the most 3-pointers per game in the country. They're at over 31, and they're strong offensive rebounders. They got a great combination of underdog traits, and they're facing a pretty vulnerable giant. So there is a pretty big difference in the basic strength between these teams, but Marshall's a fun killer.
Well, and also Elizabeth Kitley, I mean, her status with her knee is a huge factor in this game.
Right.
You know, it's got to be. You know, look, we don't have any inside information there, but it sure seems hard for her to come back, right?
I don't think she's going to be back, and I don't think our model, and I know that our model wasn't able to account for that in time. So you got to adjust your upset percentages accordingly.
All right, well, let's head on over to Albany for Albany Region 1, okay? And that's where we'll find 2 huge upset chances. Let's start with the Trev Alberts game women's side, okay? It's hilarious. In case you haven't been following this, Trev Alberts, Nebraska great football player, Nebraska athletic director, is leaving for Texas A&M. Somehow, Nebraska is playing Texas A&M in the first round of both the men's and women's tournaments. Here, Nebraska is a 6 seed, Texas A&M is an 11 seed, and our model gives Texas A&M a 42% chance of pulling the upset. In large part, these teams just aren't that different in terms of our basic power rankings. Nebraska's 26th in our ratings, Texas A&M 38th. That's only like a 3 points per 100 possession difference, right?
That's it. I got nothing else to add. There's 3 points per 100 possessions difference between these teams. It's the kind of thing we see on the men's side all the time. You know, we're talking about Clemson and New Mexico, right? There's games like that. Sometimes you get 6-11 or 5-12 matchups where the teams are just very even in their strengths. And that's something you can see once you start to apply advanced analytics to the game. These teams are just close. We give them about a 42% chance of an upset, even though they're separated by 5 seeds.
Let's head to our favorite upset, I think. Team you've been talking about for weeks and just hoping they'd get in because of their giant killing tactics. And that's that's Florida Gulf Coast, the 12 seed. They're taking on number 5 Oklahoma. And man, do we like this one. It's about a 43% chance of happening, right, Peter?
Florida Gulf Coast was our number 1 killer last year, and they came through. So, of course, we love them forever. They are the definition of a team that creates smart shots for itself while limiting them for their opponents. They build the number and value of their possessions, and they are a lethal killer throughout the years. This team is always getting 12 seeds and almost always pulling upsets in the tournament. You'd think that even though they play in the A-Sun, that the selection committee might catch on, but no, they got another 12 seed this year. Look, Florida Gulf Coast typically takes 1,000 threes a season. This year, they're a little under that, but they're still second in 3-point rate, okay? They're great at stealing the ball. They're great at amassing offensive rebounds. They're great at defensive reboundings and in limiting opponent steals. Bailey Bartram on this team has 163 point attempts in 560 minutes. Carl Semesco, the Florida Gulf Coast coach, should be in the Hall of Fame. He has brought the 3-point revolution to the women's game. It's starting now to take hold. They're by far the greatest exponents of this strategy. Florida Gulf Coast hired him before they had a gym, Jordan. Okay. That's how long he's been with the program.
Did you say they just hired him before Jim Jordan?
No, sir. I said they hired him before they built their gym. I'll mention one other thing. Oklahoma plays fast and they ranked number 24 in our basic power rankings. They're not too hot a 5 seed. So I think this is a classic example of a somewhat overvalued giant versus the best long-term giant killer in women's basketball history. Florida Gulf Coast. Go read about them. Read what we've done about them. Go learn about them. Go root for them.
Well, while you're learning about them, we're going to take a quick break, and they'll be back with more upsets right after this. We're back with more women's tournament upsets. Let's keep rolling through the bracket with a couple more games we like a lot in our model and one to avoid. So let's go over to Portland Region 4.
Again with the name Portland 4. I mean, it sounds like
it sounds like an outpost in outer space.
I was just gonna say it sounds like a title of a bad science fiction movie.
Right.
Let's use bad science fiction movies for the regional names. Okay.
We're approaching Portland 4. Begin docking sequence.
We're in the Outlander region.
Yeah. All right. Portland 4. You've got the 6 seed Tennessee against the 11 seed Green Bay. The model gives us about a 32% chance of an upset. And, we see some things in Tennessee that some of the things we pick on Giants on the men's side for struggling with, we're seeing in Tennessee on the women's side.
Tennessee's gone back to calling themselves the Lady Vols. They were just the Volunteers for about 10 years now. And I don't know that I have a strong position on that, but it is interesting to see some of the lady or feminine prefixes being dropped from these teams. Tennessee's gone back in the Lady Horned Frogs of TCU was always my favorite. Can I
get on my soapbox for a second? I've always been against the lady prefixes because here's the thing. You go to the college, you're the team. And now it's one thing if it was like Amherst was the Lord Jeffs, you couldn't be the Lord Jeffs.
So there are some teams Jeffs.
It's a male,
right? But are masculine by definition, right?
If you're a tiger, you're a tiger, and I think it's really demeaning to the women to say that we have to specify that they're the lady version of this mascot. Anyway, I digress.
If the mascot isn't by definition masculine, why are you adding lady to it? That's a good point.
Right. So tell me about the
it's also possibly demeaning to the Tigers. I mean,
it's really, but whatever. If we stood here and talked about all the misogynistic things there are in sports, we could do, a 4-hour-long show every day. Let's go back. Tennessee, why are they vulnerable?
Tennessee's not the same Tennessee that we're used to seeing these past few years. For 4 years in a row, they were in the top 10 as an offensive rebounding team. They're number 43 in the country this year. They're also just loose with the ball, Jordan. They turn the ball over on 17.2% of their possessions. That ranks 78th. They generate turnovers on just 13.5% of opponent possessions. That ranks 355th in the country.
Right. And to put a fine point on that, Peter, we talk at length about how favorites need to have characteristics other than shooting to protect them on a cold night. That usually comes from playing the possession game. And what you're saying is they lose the possession game.
Right. And they're now going to face an underdog who has great guard play. Bailey Butler on Green Bay has 5.5 assists a game. Green Bay has a huge turnover gap going in their favor. They lead the country in assist to turnover ratio. And here's the thing. This is another thing we're seeing a little bit now in the women's game that we have the capacity to understand that we didn't before we had advanced analytics. Green Bay's a strong mid-major team. They're the number 50 team in our rankings. There's just 7 points per 100 possessions of difference between these two squads. So you put two teams that are not that far apart in basic strength together with potentially sloppy ball handling by the favorite and great ball handling by the underdog, and that's why we give this a good chance.
Well, let's go to another strong mid-major team. The 11 seed Middle Tennessee in Albany Region 2 is taking on the 6 seed Louisville. We like Middle Tennessee a lot, but our model only gives this about a 25% chance of an upset, in part because we like Louisville a lot too. They're probably better than your typical 6 seed, right?
Yeah, they are. They're an excellent. I mean, they're the opposite of some of these misseedings we've been talking about. They are powerful for a 6 team. Look, we do like Middle Tennessee. They are a strong mid-major. They're number 43 in our rankings. Savannah Wheeler, over 17 points a game, shooting 37.5% from threes. Outstanding player to take note of. There's only about 8 points of difference between these teams, but Louisville's just very strong. So, I mean, Middle Tennessee was our number 2 killer in the whole list last year. They didn't win, but they they're a pretty good underdog. It's just they're running into a tough opponent.
Right. And then a lot of folks like to focus on 12-5 matchups and they're drawn to them for upsets. I think sometimes it's as helpful to talk about avoiding an upset pick as it is to pick one. In this case, Colorado Drake, the 5-12 matchup in that Albany 2 region, we only give it about a 12% chance of an upset. So that's a great one to sort of let other people make a mistake there and avoid it, right?
Yeah, look, Drake plays fast. They score a lot of points. They're a 12 and a 12-5. Like you just said, that's enough for so many people to take them. When you let the air out of their statistics, they're still a good offense. They're just not as impressive as most people probably think from seeing that, they lead the nation in scoring or whatever whatever basic stats they're looking at. So this one, hopefully hopefully you can find the value in the favorite and not go with a trendy underdog just because they're trendy.
So, Peter, before we wrap up, we talked about title contenders, long shot title contenders, South Carolina versus the field last week. I know you were big on Uconn at the time. Has their landing a 3 seed changed anything in your mind? Are they still sort of your non-1 seed best pick to win the tournament?
Yeah, look, let's get serious. What exactly is the argument that people are making when they say a team doesn't beat teams that are better than it, but beats only teams that they play who are on a weak schedule? Jordan, every team beats teams that are worse than it at a better rate than they play against teams that are really great teams. UConn has not played in any close games this season. But if you take all the data and you smush it into one matrix, okay, and you say, how good would a team have to be to put up the numbers UConn has put up? The answer you get is they about 50 points better than the average team in the country per 100 possessions. That's huge. It's the second best rating in the whole country. So I mean, it's very strange. It's like calling the Yankees undervalued, right? It's very strange to say Uconn and Underdog anywhere near each other in the same paragraph. But I think people are sleeping on Uconn. I mean, what do they not do, or what do they not have that you want? You want a superstar? You want a great coach? You want a team with great guards? You want a team that shoots well from 3? They deserve better than a 3 seed. That probably may even be some motivation. But the argument that somehow there's there supposed to be some character flaw in UConn that they don't beat the very best teams? Who does beat the very best teams regularly? South Carolina, nobody else.
Well, I'm really intrigued watching the Pac-12 swan song here in this tournament. They've got 6 teams that are seeded 5 or better. We talked a lot about Utah in that 5 seed as a team that could, if you're looking for someone outside of a top 4 spot to make a run, we've talked about Utah and why their analytics show that they're a better team than people realize. So watch them, maybe upsetting Texas in the Sweet 16. But it's going to be really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if one of those Pac-12 teams emerges from, they're going to be so battle tested from having faced each other all season. And then I could really see one of those teams winning a national championship.
You said we could go for 4.5 hours about the misogynistic aspects of sports. I just want to point out the Pac-12 implosion driven completely by football, a sport that women don't play, happening in the year that the Pac-12 has reached the apex of women's sports. 6 national title contenders. We just named Arizona as a potential upset, as potential Cinderella. They were 7th in the conference, right?
Right.
And here it is. Here they are blowing themselves up. It's terrible.
Yeah, no, it's there's going to be a reckoning at some point that when fan involvement decreases because rivalries are dead, there's going to be, they're going to have to reevaluate all this expansion.
The Norfolk State Spartanettes, Jordan. I started watching them and following them because they just take the ball away from opponents. They steal the ball on 15.7% of opponent possessions. That's the 3rd best rate in the country. So if you're going to watch a 2-15 game, watch them, root for them. There's almost no chance they're going to win, but they
and
are
last point.
Team. Yep.
South Carolina is still minus 140 to win the tournament. We're still taking the field, right?
Jordan, we estimate there's about a 37% chance South Carolina will win the title. That is a large number. It's twice as large as either UConn or on the men's side as Houston.
And on that note, we're excited to watch the games. We'll be back next week with some analysis as we head into the Sweet 16. Till then, I'm Jordan. That's Peter. Happy Madness.